Guest of the day, it is Mr. Ron Busby. Now, Mr. Ron Busby don't have over 500,000 followers. No, he don't. But he has over $500,000 in his bank account. Yes, he does. And we want to talk about how he built that network. So let's talk about how you generated $15 million on your first business.
That's a great question. Before I get started, I always start, anytime I get the microphone in front of me with this, I say, to your audience listener, I was blessed to have both a mother and a father. My mother was an educator as well as a minister, so I know my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and was a pretty smart guy. But I also had a father, and my father was a business owner as well as a Black Panther. So I'm about entrepreneurism, and I don't take a whole lot of mess. I started my first firm from a small business that my father had. I had been in corporate America for about 10 years, was 27 years old, and I remember this like it was yesterday. Going into my office and being there after about 4 months, didn't mind working 4 hours extra, so I got to work 7 a.m. every morning and didn't leave until 7 p.m. each evening, putting in an extra 4 hours a day. And then at about 4 or 5 months into my career, my supervisor called me in and asked me to move my things, and I thought I was getting ready to get let go. And he said, no, I'm going to move you down to Joe's office. And Joe was a 56-year-old white guy who had been there about 30 years. And that day I decided I got to leave. I got to figure out an exit strategy because I didn't want to work another 30 years and then be reporting to a 27-year-old guy that didn't mind working 4 more hours. And so at that day I decided to look for something else. And my father had a small janitorial firm with 5 employees, my mother, my father, my 2 sisters, and myself. And I left a job that was paying about $150,000 a year in annualized salary to go run a business that was doing about $150,000. And between the years of 1989 and 1995, I grew the firm from roughly $150,000 a year to over $15 million. I got involved in some city projects. To go from $750,000 to $1.5 million wasn't that difficult. I know your audience can't see me, but I'm a pretty good-looking guy. I wore a suit and tie most of the time, and clients trusted me. And I say that because appearance is extremely important. Where you hang out, who you hang out with, and so although I'm not a social media hound, I make sure that my image, my visibility, and where and when you see me, I'm always going to look like a guy that you can trust. I ended up reading a book after I got to about $7 million by a gentleman out of the Baltimore area, Black man named Reginald Lewis. The name of the book was Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? And it really kind of changed my outlook, and I realized that I had to be able to acquire a firm, and so I ended up buying another firm, and it was about the same size. So that got me to about 15 million, and then ultimately we did about 21 million.
Now, let's talk about, you hooking up with some heavyweights with the USBlackChambers. How did you hook up with that?
Well, we've been doing our national conference for the last 8 years to really bring a combination of chamber leaders, business leaders, along with young entrepreneurs together to really have a cross-sectional conversation about how to improve our communities. And we feel like we can do that internally. If the number one concern that we have for African Americans is unemployment, we have a solution. There's 2 million African Americans unemployed today, but there's also 2.6 million African American owned businesses. So our drive is that each one of those businesses could hire 1 additional African American. We don't care who's in the White House. We don't care what the Congress's budget is. We know that internally we have $1 trillion. Usually that's white folk talking about black folk having $1 trillion. But in this case, this is African Americans talking about controlling the $1 trillion that we have to stay in our community longer. And so we're bringing business leaders, chamber leaders, elected officials, and people across the globe to talk about ways in which we can have sustainability and growth in our black communities. It's a combination. You gotta have visibility for social media, you gotta have visibility in reference to technology to be able to help you, but you also have to have relationships. So my business owners as well as people that are looking for jobs, I always say, 1, they ain't creating no new job. Go find out exactly what it is you want, and either volunteer for someone that's doing exactly what it is you want to be able to do, or be able to bring your talents and services to be able to grow that firm to where one of 2 things can even happen. Either you have now earned yourself a job because they can no longer afford to let you go, or if you've been there long enough, you can do things like acquire that firm. And ultimately, that's what we need. We need fewer young people going out into business for themselves, messing up their own name, their own credit, or the family's credit worthiness, to be able to now take over some of the second generation firms, which we have very few in our community, to really be able to have the size and the scale that we need to be able to compete globally as well as here in the United States.
What do you tell a young person to keep them motivated when they don't know the avenue? The educational system has failed us. So if the educational system has failed us to go out here to have the knowledge to acquire a business like that, what are the steps we need to do to get in position to do so?
A couple questions. First off, you talked about using your fingers to help spur your own economy. And I think young people got to use the technology that's out there to continue to direct them in the right path to be able to grow. You were able to go and fill out a job application, or fill out a request for proposal, or submit a proposal, or submit a bid. Those days are few and far and in between now. We have more paperwork to be able to go through to find that right employee, or to find that right business owner or contractor. If you don't have someone that is sitting in the room representing your best interest, your chances of success are few and far and in between.
WPGC 95.5, right back. Mr. Ron Busby is in the building. We're talking to a CEO of the USBlackChambers, a native of Oakland, California, graduated with honors from both schools, Florida A&M and Clark Atlanta University.
Hey.
Now, with those accolades behind you, a lot of people are intimidated probably to approach you or to talk to you because they feel like, who am I to talk to this man with all this knowledge?
I tell a story, and I had this conversation a few years ago before I purchased my home, and I told this story about the acquisition. I said I used a black realtor, no big deal. I used a black bank, I used a black mortgage company, I used a black title company, I used a black moving company, I used a black home inspector, I used a black pest control inspector, I used a black installation inspector. And when I told that story, it was an audience full of millennials, African American. They were like, man, that's great. Tomorrow, one of the guys said, I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna go down to the industrial bank and I'm going to open up a bank account for myself. And I said, hold on, young man, no, you're not. I'm gonna take a group of you down on Friday. I want all of you to put on your suits and ties, and I want you to look professional. And they didn't understand the rationale behind it. And after we got there on Friday, we had the media there, we had the news there, and it made a movement out of a simple ideas that black people should be putting their money in black-owned banks. Well, until someone was able to see that, they didn't understand the importance of it. And the reason that it's important is because 40% of African Americans don't have credit at all. So we're talking about a new economy being the e-commerce economy, where you're buying everything online. You just talked about the importance of being able to go online and make transactions. But if I don't have a credit card, I can't rent a car. Right? If I don't have a credit card, I can't get a room at the National Gaylord where we'll be this weekend. If I don't have a credit card, most of the transactions that we're doing in the new economy are going to keep black folk out. So those young men and women going down to the bank to open up a bank account not only talked about the importance of what they were doing today, but it was moving our economy forward. And so when we think of things that may be simple in our own minds, when you tell other people the importance of it and you tell them how to actually execute it, then everything now becomes simple. Everything is difficult until you do it the first time.
There it is. Somebody want to get in contact with you and just want to pick your brain. How can they do that, Mr. Busby?
Well, you can find out more information about the U.S. Black Chamber at www.usblackchambers.org. Again, www.usblackchambers.org. I thank you so much for allowing us to be on the air today. I've been talking about making America great again. And I say, and we say at the U.S. Black Chamber, that we want America to be great as well. But in order for there to be a great America, there's got to be a great black America. And in order for there to be a great black America, we must have great black businesses. And in order for there to be great black businesses, we need your audience, we need your people that are listening, your followers, to be able to support other black-owned businesses. Again, we have $1 trillion in our community. We can change the conditions of our community by just our spending and shopping habits.
You better get with him if you know like I know. See how he made that 15 million. He's my social media icon guest of the night. Make sure you reach out to him. Social media.
You can find us on Facebook at USBlackChambers. You can find us on Twitter at USBlackChamber, the number 1. And you can find all of us at our website again, www.usblackchambers.org.
There it is. We're doing it for the community. We're doing it for the village. Know this. Knowledge is power. Keep it locked. WPGC 95.5. Thank you, Mr. Busby.